Hi everyone, my name's Amity and this is Read by Amity, and today we are doing my January wrap up. It is the 31st of January now, so hopefully I'm able to wrap this up quickly and get it out to you so that I can share my thoughts with everything that I read this month. So I've finished 14 books already and I will hopefully have finished 15 if not 16 by the end of today, because I am in the middle of 2 books right now. So I am going to go through all of them and I will mention the 2 that I'm in the middle of at the end, but obviously I haven't finished them yet so I don't have thoughts on those. I'm not going to be talking about the plot of the books or any synopsis for the books, but I will list all of them down below so that you can go and check them out for yourself if you don't know about them. A couple of them might be sequels, so I don't really want to talk about the plot and risk accidentally spoiling part of another book for you. So yeah, I guess we'll just jump straight into it and let's talk about all the books that I read. So the first book I read in the month of January was Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wogeschig Rice. I am sure that I didn't pronounce that correctly, but yes, that's this book here, and this one I was really impressed with. It was super atmospheric, super creepy. I had this ominous feeling of foreboding, like something terrible was going to happen, and it was just everything that I hoped for in this book. And this one was read as part of the Winterween Readathon, which is hosted by Olivia and Gabby. I will put their channels down below. Obviously it isn't winter here, but it was still really fun to join in with that readathon and a great way to start off my reading year. This book also really reminded me of the movie 30 Days of Night. There weren't any vampires in it, but it was still very reminiscent of that movie. If you've seen it, you'll know what I mean. So this one I rated 4.75 stars and I absolutely loved it. Loved kicking off the year with it. It was fantastic. The next book that I read in the month of January was Where They Found Her by Kimberly McCreight, and this one was okay. I read this one for the Book Troop book club for their January pick, which was also hosted by Gabby, which I will also link that information down below. Where They Found Her was a little bit too convoluted for my liking, and there was a lot of swapping between point of views, and I think it could have worked really well, except that it was just too drawn out in my opinion. So I did enjoy it, but I was only able to rate it 3.5 stars, and I think it could probably go down to 3.25, maybe even 3 stars, just because it hasn't even been a full month yet. I already have trouble recalling a lot of that book, so yeah, that one is Where They Found Her by Kimberly McCreight. The third book that I finished in the month of January was 9 Lives by Peter Swanson. This one I received as an advanced reader copy on NetGalley, and I originally thought this one came out in January. I had it written in my journal, in my reading journal, that it came out in January, but when I went back to write my review I noticed that it had a March release date, so this one actually isn't out yet. But if you are a fan of Peter Swanson, I think it is so much better than his last year or the year before's release, which was Every Value Break, which I was super anticipating, but it really didn't live up to the hype for me. Well, didn't live up to my expectations, that's for sure. But 9 Lives was fantastic. It had the Agatha Christie tie-ins and it felt quite like a cozy mystery, but it wasn't a cozy mystery. It was super intriguing and it just had like this overwhelming feel of nostalgia to it, which I really wanted from it, and I'm so glad that I loved this one, because I was scared that Every Value Break was the start of the downfall of Peter Swanson in my eyes. So I'm glad that I love that one. I rated it a 4.75 stars out of 5, and yeah, that one was great. I will say, as a content warning, it does talk about Agatha Christie's previous novels, including the title of her book that had the N-word in it. The fourth book I read in the month of January was one that I've had on my physical TBR for quite some time. This one is unfortunately going to be an unhaul book after I finish filming this, and that one is Stormdancer by J. Kristoff. I knew that I wasn't going to enjoy this one as much as I have enjoyed some of J. Kristoff's other stuff. It is his debut novel, and you can really tell in the writing style that it is his first book. There are discussions online about his use of certain cultures in these books and his appropriation of certain cultures. If I can find the sources that I read about it, I will put those down below so you can have a look at that. There are also reviews of this one on Goodreads, but I found that this one did not hold my interest for long enough, and I had no connection to the characters. So unfortunately, this one was only a 2-star read for me, and I am going to be letting this one go. I will donate that to the local lifeline here. The next book that I read in January was Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khor, and this one I also read for the Winterween Readathon, and it was purely for the prompt to read a novella. It was nothing like what I expected. It wasn't really a horror. I didn't find it scary at all. I found it quite annoying, and I know I ended up skim reading this one towards the end because I found that the setting of the story and the plot intention of the story was at odds with the way that the characters were written and the way that the character relationships were developed in that one, and I just ended up finding it so annoying and hard to get through. So unfortunately this one is only a 1.5-star read for me, but I am glad that I read it because it has always been something that I've been interested in reading. I'm just upset that it wasn't a great one for me. But yes, that one is Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khor. The next book that I read in January was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This one is super short, super lovely. It's got this sense of magical essence to it while being completely mundane and completely ordinary, and I just found it so strange and wonderful, and the characters were all so relatable, and I just felt like I could walk down the street and meet any of these characters and talk to them in real life. So it was just a really fun ride to go along on, and I think it's one that I will reread in the future. This one was a solid 4-star read for me, and I highly recommend that you pick it up if you're interested in reading about just the human condition and what it's like to be a regular person and to be content with your life. I love that. The next book that I read in January was On the Road by Jack Kerouac. This one is a modern classic, and it is definitely a book of its time. It has some really interesting language choices, and I found it to be quite dense at times, but it was gritty and raw and just like the perfect road trip book. I can see where so many other books have gotten their inspiration from this one, and I'm just so glad that I actually got to it and read it this year. It's been on my TBR for such a long time, and actually Jack from Jack in the Books convinced me to read this one. I can't remember if he even liked it. I just know that after he spoke about it, I was insistent on reading this one, so I'm glad that I finally got to that one. This one was a 3.75 stars for me. Not my favorite classic, but definitely one that I'm glad to have read, so that's that one. The next book that I read in the month of January was Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shauna Maguire, and this one was a 5-star read. It is exactly what I wanted from this series. I think it's book 7 or 8 maybe in the series, so obviously I cannot talk about it that much at all, but it was perfectly atmospheric, perfectly dark. I loved following Cora's point of view, and I just found it chef's kiss. It was amazing. Once again, I was so pleased to have such a perfect installment of the Wayward Children series after Across the Green Grass Fields, because that one really was a miss for me. I did not like that one at all. I found it boring, and I just didn't enjoy it. But Where the Drowned Girls Go was incredible, and I can't wait to see what is next for the Wayward Children series, because this was top tier. The next book that I read in January was The Mirror Season by Anna Marie McLemore. This one I enjoyed. I think that I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. There's definitely some hard-hitting topics in there, trigger warnings for sexual assault and discussion of rape and suicide. Definitely check out the reviews for this one before you go into it if those are things that trigger you, because it doesn't shy away from those topics. I think it's a really important story to have. It is young adult, so it is told from teenagers' point of views, and I feel like Anna Marie McLemore did a great job of entwining magical realism and this heavy topic together and telling a great story. I found it really easy to get into and read, and I really felt for the characters. The only downside to this one I found was that I really didn't agree with how the main character behaved in the story, and I really didn't like the choices that she made. It frustrated the heck out of me. So for this one, I'm only going to be able to rate it 3.25 stars, just because I can't get over how frustratingly annoying the main character was. But I do think it's an important book to have, and I really like Anna Marie McLemore's writing style, so I'm glad that I read it. And also, stunning cover, absolutely beautiful cover. I love the colors on this one. I love the contrast and how it's kind of like one of those negative photos where the colors are inverse. But yeah, it was a good read, but one that I would not recommend to everyone. The next book I read in January was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This one is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, if you couldn't tell by the title. I read this one for the Household Book Club January pick, which I will link the live show down below for this one if it's out already, or I will link the details for the Household Book Club down below as well. And this one I went into with such high expectations. I was really looking forward to it because I love Shakespeare, I love Romeo and Juliet, and I love retelling specifically, so retellings of Shakespeare, sorry. And I was loving this book at the start, if you couldn't tell by all of my tabs there. I did do some slight annotating of this one, and it was looking like it was going to be a 5-star read until about a quarter to halfway of the way through, and I realized that the world building wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be, the magic systems weren't, and it was starting to drag on for me. There were like, I was getting crumb fed everything that I wanted, but I was getting drip fed everything that I wanted, but it just wasn't happening fast enough for me, and unfortunately because of that I ended up kind of getting bored from about halfway onwards. And I did like the book, and I am going to continue with this duology, and also I'm going to continue with Chloe Gong's writing in general, because I think she has a lot to offer and I really enjoyed her writing style. But it was just too drawn out and too long in my opinion. Not enough happened for it to be that long. So this one is only a 3-star at the moment. I have thought about raising it to a 3.5 because I haven't been able to stop thinking about this one, but I think the live show for it is happening today, so I'm going to join in on that one and have a look and see what other people are saying about it and see what other people's thoughts are, and then maybe that would help me feel a bit better about my rating in the end. So yeah, that one's These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I definitely want to get my hands on the second book in the duology this year, so hopefully you'll see that one in the future too. The next book that I read in the month of January was The Gilded Ones by Namina Fauna, and I had this one on my 2021 anticipated releases list and I really wanted to get to it, but I never ended up getting around to it. So that was kind of what January was for me. It was catching up on all of the physical TBR that I had insisted on getting to, whilst also reading all of the book club picks and readathon picks that I had intended to read for January. So So The Gilded Ones was definitely in my priority list to get to, and I listened to this one on audio and followed along in the book, and it shocked me. I was in love with this book. It had the perfect fantasy world. It was beautifully told. I loved all of the character developments. I think that The magic system was incredible and I was just completely enthralled by it from the start. I originally rated this a 3.25 stars. Don't ask me why, I have no idea why I rated it that low. I ended up bumping it up to a 4.25 stars, but I haven't been able to get it out of my head, and I think that it's going to be creeping its way towards a 4.75, maybe even a 5. There was only one real thing that I wish that I saw more of, and that was that the character relationships and the character dynamics were a little more fleshed out. I'm pretty sure that there is another one out or coming out for this one. If there is, I'll pop it on the screen here so that you can see, but if that's the case, I am 100% if that's the case, I am 100% picking that one up this year or whenever it comes out, because I loved this one and I'm so glad that I finally got around to it because it was exactly what I wanted. And yeah. The next book I read in the month of January was Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix, and this one is just a non-fiction kind of history of 80s, is it just 80s? 70s and 80s horror fiction novels and their covers. And you know the mass market paperback and the really old style of book covers. It just goes through the history of the covers and cover designs, choices, and just has a lot of interesting information about horror books in the 70s and 80s. So this was really fun to read. I think I will flick back through it again because I spent a lot of time looking at the pictures and just kind of skimming the explanations, but it's got a lot of cool information in there. It was fun, informative, and yeah, I just love seeing how horror books were marketed back in the 70s and 80s. So I recommend, if you are a horror book fan and you're interested in that kind of design element of horror books, that you pick this one up because it was phenomenal. It was actually recommended in a podcast that I was listening to, Creepy Caffeine, which I'll link down below. I can't remember what episode it was, so I'm not going to try and find that one, but I will link the podcast down below because it is also a really fantastic podcast, and they recommend their favorite horror fiction, work of fiction or non-fiction, whether it's in stories or a movie or a TV show or anything like that, at the end. So of each podcast. Well, back when I was listening to it, they did. So yeah, that was this one. I rated this one a 4-star. I felt like it was kind of hard to rate this one because obviously it is non-fiction. Like, it was great. It did what it set out to do. I just found that it wasn't quite that 5-star that I guess was looking for. Not that I know what would make it a 5-star, but yeah, that's this one. So I have 2 books left that I've read this month, and then the 2 books that I'm in the middle of. And the next book that I finished this month was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This one is a literary fiction sci-fi. It is exactly what I wanted from it. This is the first Kazuo Ishiguro book that I've read. I do have a couple of other of their collection on my bookshelf that I want to get to soon, but this one was on my 2021 anticipated releases, so I really wanted to make sure that I got to this one as soon as possible. And I think that this was a really endearing story and a great look at how people cope with grief and accepting grief, and also just the human condition. Again, I definitely recommend this one. This was a 4.5-star read for me. I think that if I read it through again, which I do plan on doing sometime, maybe not this year but maybe next year, that it could be a 5-star read. I think it was just didn't quite hit that 5-star mark for me. I think it might have been how many other books that I had read and how many other different genres I had read at the time. I couldn't give this the detailed attention that I would normally give my literary fiction reads, but I definitely enjoyed it and would recommend highly. So that's Clara and the Sun. And the final book that I have finished up until now in the month of January is Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. This one I started, when did it come out? 2020? Yes, this one I started the week that it came out in 2020. I went and picked it up from the store because Ready Player One was one of my top reads of 2018, I think I read it in. So I was very excited to see what this installment had for us, but I put it down for obviously 2 years or a year and a bit, and I thought I need to finish all of my current reads and look at what I want to keep and what I want to unhaul. So I picked this one up and finished that one on audio and followed along with the book this month, and it was fun being back in the Oasis. I loved the adventure, I loved all of the pop culture references. That's what I found so compelling about the first book. I just loved how nostalgic it felt, but I didn't think that the story was needed. I didn't really necessarily like how they continued it on. Ready Player One is going to be a standalone in my mind, but it was fine. This was fine. I rated it 3.25 stars just because I think that I really have an affinity with the way that Ernest Cline writes, so I found it really fast and easy to read, but otherwise wasn't for me. Okay, so my battery is flashing at me, so I want to quickly get through these before my camera dies, but these are the 2 books that I'm currently in the middle of. One of them I know for a fact that I will finish today. The other one I don't have high hopes, but I'm still going to count it towards my January reads because I am about 3/4 of the way through. But the first one is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. This one so far is wacky and fun and kind of weird, but I'm loving it. And the second one is my most anticipated release of 2022, and that is To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. This one is a chunker. I am going through and annotating as I listen, and I'm liking it. I think it's going to be a lot different to A Little Life, and that was one of my favorite reads of 2020. And yeah, it's a journey so far. But those are the 2 books that I'm trying to finish today, if not today, in the coming week, and I'm still going to count them towards my January reads. So that's, sorry if the angle has changed, my camera battery did die, which is a pain in the butt, considering I only had about 3 sentences left to go. But yes, that including the 2 that I'm currently reading, hopefully to finish, I will have read 16 books in the month of January. So let me know if you have read any of these, what you thought of them in the comments down below. I'm also going to link my Storygraph below because I am moving from Goodreads to Storygraph this year completely, so add me on there, follow along with what I'm reading on there. We can be friends and I do quite a few challenges on there as well, reading challenges. And yeah, let me know what you read in the month of January, if you enjoyed any of these, what your favorite book is. Let's just have a chat down below. I will hopefully see you soon. I do have a video planned to talk about some of the books, not all of them, but some of the books that I plan on reading in February. So I will probably film that after this and get that out to you soon as well. Anyway, bye till next time.